My Earl Grey tea had long since grown a thick, cold skin, but I was oblivious, my gaze fixed on the bruised, pre-dawn sky stretching beyond my window. The relentless drizzle outside my Manhattan brownstone played a somber rhythm on the glass, a persistent drumbeat echoing the quiet solitude that had become my constant companion. My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 82 years young, I've navigated life as a widow for 20 long years. Sometimes, I feel as though I've already lived a multitude of lives, and this final chapter, serene yet solitary, is simply unfolding. This brownstone, my sanctuary for decades, remains steadfast, for stories of weathered brick, a cramped, perpetually damp garden in the back. Memories once filled these rooms, Dylan's boyish laughter, the booming baritone of my husband, William, weekend jazz drifting from the gramophone. Now, only the creak of settling timbers and the distant hum of the city remained. I pushed myself from my armchair, my knees protesting with a familiar ache, a sure sign of impending rain. But what did it matter? Rain or shine, my days were much the same. Passing the mantelpiece, I paused at a framed photo, William, handsome and earnest on our wedding day. A pristine suit, carefully parted hair, a shy, almost apologetic smile. He'd been an architect, a man of quiet conviction. Actions speak louder than words, he often said, and he truly lived by it, building, providing, always there. What would you say, William? I whispered, my fingers tracing the dusty glass. What would you say about our son now? Dylan, our only child, arrived 5 years into our marriage. We adored him, perhaps too much, though we never saw it as spoiling. He excelled in school, polite and driven, dreaming of designing skyscrapers like his father. But everything shifted when William's health failed. A brutal, swift cancer stole him in a matter of months. Dylan was 42 then, already a rising star in a tech firm, happily married to Scarlett. I'd foolishly believed grief would forge an unbreakable bond between us, but it did the opposite. At the memorial, Dylan was a distant figure. I recall him standing by the grave, tall and slender, with William's strong jawline but lacking his inner warmth. As William's casket was lowered, my tears flowed freely, but Dylan simply stared into the middle distance, as if the profound sorrow didn't touch him. Later that evening, after the last mourner had departed, I asked if he was all right. Mom, I'm 45. I'm not a child. You can't dwell on the past forever. I didn't grasp it then, but those words marked the slow, painful dissolution of our closeness, our mutual understanding. 3 years later, Dylan divorced Scarlett. She was a kind woman, perhaps a little too trusting, deeply in love with him. Their separation remained a mystery to me. Dylan merely mumbled something about growing apart. They had one son, Leo, then 15 years old. Custody was shared, but Leo spent most of his time with Scarlett. It was around then that I began to notice a subtle shift in Dylan. His calls grew infrequent, his visits shorter, hurried. When he did come by, he was either glued to his phone or launched into monologues about work, promotions, bonuses, his new luxury car. I tried to share his triumphs, but the connection, the warmth, was gone. One afternoon, I tried to bridge the chasm. Dylan, darling, we've become such strangers, I murmured, pouring us tea. He looked up from his glowing screen, genuinely puzzled. What are you talking about, Mom? I visit, I call. What more do you want? Attention, son. Genuine, unhurried attention. He sighed, a patronizing sound he reserved for exasperating children. Mom, I have a career, a life. I can't spend hours gossiping about neighbors or your reality shows. That's not what I mean, you know that, he cut me off. You've always been like this. Always wanting more than anyone else. Dad understood, but you never did. His words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I said nothing. What was there to say? That I'd spent my entire career as a nurse so he could have every advantage? That I'd denied myself during William's illness to afford the best specialists? That after William's death, I was the one who quietly helped Dylan with the down payment on his first home? No, I kept it inside. A mother doesn't keep score with her child. As the years crawled by, I grew accustomed to Dylan only reaching out when he needed something, typically money. For roof repairs, a stress relief vacation, or new furniture. I never refused. Perhaps that was my folly, to forgive too much, to give too freely. But isn't that what mothers do? Isn't that why I diligently saved all these years? Leo, my grandson, became my sole beacon of light. Unlike his father, he visited often, first with Scarlett, then on his own as he matured. He helped in the garden, patiently listened to my rambling stories of the past, brought me books. It was Leo who insisted I learn to use a smartphone and computer. "Grandma, you've got to stay current," he'd urged, patiently demonstrating video calls. The world moves fast. Thanks to Leo, I mastered not just calling, but social media, online shopping, and even began a gardening blog. It was my tiny sanctuary, nurturing roses and writing about them. A handful of subscribers, mostly women my age, but it brought me joy. Leo left for university in a neighboring state, pursuing a biology degree. His visits became rarer, but we bridged the distance with video calls. He spoke of his studies, his girlfriends, his future plans. I saw in him the qualities Dylan lacked: sincerity, kindness, a genuine capacity to listen. One day, last spring, Leo arrived with unexpected news. "Grandma, Dad's getting married." I was taken aback. After his divorce, Dylan had a string of relationships, but none had lasted. To whom? Olivia. She works at his firm. They've been together for about a year, but they kept it quiet. I vaguely recalled Dylan mentioning Olivia in one of his infrequent calls, but no details. Is she a good woman?" I asked cautiously. Leo shrugged. "She's direct. And a bit of a chameleon. With Dad, she's all sugar and light. But when she turns away, she's a different person." I nodded. I knew people like that. One face for the favored few, another for everyone else. "Well, if your father's happy, he says he is, but you know," Leo lowered his voice, though we were alone. "I think he's just tired of being alone. Olivia's very persistent. And she has a daughter from her first marriage, Charlotte, she's 23. They're kind of a package deal." I smiled faintly at the metaphor. My astute grandson. "People marry for all sorts of reasons, honey. It's not for us to judge." "Yeah, but," he hesitated, "they want a big wedding. A really extravagant one. Dad said he was going to ask you to help with the money." There it was. A familiar pang of bitterness, but no surprise. Of course, Dylan hadn't called himself. He'd sent a scout. "Grandma, you don't have to," Leo continued, sensing my reaction. "You have your own plans for that money." I waved it off. Plans? At my age? A cruise around the world? I forced a small smile. Money is for the living, not the departed. If your father needs help, I'll help. Leo shook his head. "Sometimes you're too generous, Grandma." Perhaps he was right, but what else was there? To refuse my only son? Besides, I clung to the hope that this wedding might, just might, bring us closer. Perhaps Olivia would be better than Leo described. Perhaps she'd bring Dylan true happiness, and a mother's greatest wish is her child's happiness. Dylan called a week later. His voice, as always when he desired something, was artificially bright, strained with false cheer. "Mom, how's your health? No aches or pains?" "I'm well, son. A few creaks in the joints, but that's just age." "Yes, age." He cleared his throat. "Listen, I have some big news. I've decided to get married." I feigned surprise. "Really? To whom?" "Her name's Olivia. She's truly wonderful. You'll absolutely adore her, intelligent, caring, an incredible hostess." "I'm genuinely happy for you," I said, meaning it. "When are you planning the big day?" A pause. "In 3 months. I know it's fast, but we just don't want to wait." And you know, Mom, another pregnant pause, we envision a truly spectacular ceremony. Olivia deserves nothing less. Of course, I agreed. Every bride dreams of a beautiful wedding. Oh, and, he coughed again, you know, I've had a rather challenging year financially, renovations, a new luxury car. How much do you need, Dylan? I asked, cutting to the chase. He named a figure. I nearly dropped the phone. It was 3 times what I had anticipated. That's, quite a sum, son. I know, Mom, but it's a wedding. A once-in-a-lifetime event. Well, it's Olivia's second, but she says the first was a total disaster. She wants to do it properly, you know. Rent the Grandview Estate, invite 150 guests, a live orchestra. The Grandview Estate was the most opulent venue in upstate New York. An historic manor overlooking the Hudson River, impossibly beautiful and impossibly expensive. 150 guests? I asked, aghast. Do you even know that many people? Well, not just friends, but colleagues, important clients, Olivia's entire family. He hesitated. Mom, you'll help, won't you? I promise I'll pay you back. We both knew he wouldn't, just as he had never repaid the money for his house, his car, his vacations. Yet, I said yes. Because he was my son, because I clung to the hope that this wedding would somehow alter our fractured relationship, because what else was there for me to do? All right, Dylan, I'll help. Thank you, Mom. He sounded genuinely relieved. You're simply the best. Olivia will be ecstatic. After that conversation, his calls became more frequent, once, sometimes twice a week, filled with meticulous details about the preparations, about Olivia, about her daughter Charlotte. It felt, for a fleeting moment, as if we were drawing closer again. I cherished it, even as a small, cynical voice deep within whispered that his interest was purely transactional. A month later, Dylan arrived with Olivia. She was a striking woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, bold makeup, and a dramatic manicure. Her smile was constant, but her eyes held a distinct chill. She surveyed my brownstone, her gaze lingering on the antique grandfather clock and the silver tea set, cherished heirlooms from my mother. Such charming pieces, she observed, her tone dismissive. They must be quite valuable. To me, yes, I replied. They were my mother's. Antiques fetch a fortune these days, she remarked casually. We drank tea and discussed the wedding, or rather, they discussed and I listened. Olivia meticulously detailed the gown, the floral arrangements, the elaborate menu. Dylan nodded, wearing the expression of a man who'd heard it 100 times but still found it utterly captivating. I offered my help beyond the financial contribution. Oh, don't trouble yourself, Eleanor, Olivia said, patting my arm, her touch surprisingly firm. At your age, it's best to conserve your energy. Our planner and I have every detail covered. I'm not entirely infirm, I countered. Perhaps I could assist with the seating chart or, no, darling, she interrupted, her voice saccharine. It's all meticulously planned. Just arrive and enjoy the spectacle. As they departed, Olivia offered a fleeting, formal hug. We're so delighted you'll grace our wedding, Eleanor. It means the world to Dylan. Something in her tone unsettled me, as if she were bestowing a great favor upon me by allowing my presence at my own son's wedding, a wedding I was funding. After they left, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the relentless rain. A dark premonition settled in my heart, whispering that this wedding would bring neither Dylan nor me happiness. But I pushed the thought away. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps Olivia truly loved him. Perhaps I was simply struggling to let go, to accept that my son had chosen another woman as the epicenter of his world. Leo called that evening. How was the grand meeting with your future daughter-in-law, Grandma? He asked, a faint irony in his voice. It was enlightening, I replied evasively. The Grandview estate is magnificent. And outrageously expensive. Dad told me you went over the menu and seating. Did you like their ideas? It was, extravagant. Grandma, I know that tone. What's wrong? Oh, nothing much. Just feeling a little superfluous. I'm paying for the wedding, but I have no say in any of the decisions. I'm shocked Dad allows it. Leo's voice held a note of genuine annoyance. He's always been passive, but not to this extent. Olivia has him wrapped around her finger. Perhaps he's simply in love, I suggested. People often lose their heads when they're in love. At 52? After a divorce and 2 decades of living on his own? No, Grandma, it's something else. Olivia is a master manipulator. Leo, honey, don't fret. It's their day, their choices. No, Grandma, it's not right. I'll talk to Dad. Please don't, I said hastily. I don't want to cause any trouble. You're not causing trouble. They're the ones being disrespectful. You're funding this entire circus, and they're treating you like an unwelcome intruder. The next day, Miss Potter's promised estimate arrived. The final total was 40% higher than initially discussed. It consumed almost everything I had left after decades of prudent saving, nearly depleting what I had hoped to leave to Leo as an inheritance. I picked up my pen and signed the consent form, agreeing to every exorbitant expense. Perhaps, just perhaps, this would finally secure my rightful place in my son's life. The next 2 weeks blurred into a feverish haze. Olivia called almost daily, a torrent of new ideas, demands, and grievances. The shade of the tablecloths was wrong. The menu had to be altered due to some vague, important guest allergies. The musicians were problematic. One afternoon, her call found me in a particularly exasperated state. Eleanor, have you found the perfect outfit? I ordered a dress, charcoal gray, precisely as you requested. Charcoal gray? We said ivory. Or pale lavender. No, Olivia, you specified charcoal gray or a very light lavender. I chose charcoal gray. But it's completely unsuitable. The groom's mother must wear ivory, and the bride's mother silver. It's the entire aesthetic. You failed to mention that before, I retorted, my irritation simmering. The dress is already paid for. Return it. Olivia snapped. And acquire an ivory one. I'm certain you can locate something appropriate in a fortnight. I drew a slow, fortifying breath, counting to 10. Olivia, I have already expended a considerable sum on this garment. I will not be returning it. What do you mean, you won't? Her voice ascended sharply. Do you intend to disrupt the visual harmony? The photographs will be ruined. I'm confident no one will notice such a minor detail, I stated calmly. I will notice. A distinct thud, as if Olivia had slammed her hand on a table. Eleanor, if you genuinely wish to support Dylan, you will comply with my request. I closed my eyes. This was it, the manipulation Leo had warned me about. Olivia was wielding my son as a weapon. All right, I conceded. I'll see what can be done. Splendid. Olivia's tone instantly sweetened to an artificial honey. I knew you'd understand. I'll forward you some excellent options. 5 minutes later, my phone was besieged by notifications. Olivia had sent links to dresses from exclusive London boutiques, each costing at least 3 times what I had already spent, and all scandalously youthful for a woman my age, plunging necklines, bare shoulders, excessive sequins. I didn't call her back immediately. Instead, I drove to a mall in a neighboring town and spent the entire day traversing stores. Finally, I discovered a modest dress in a soft ivory shade, with long sleeves and a tasteful high collar. It was elegant, age-appropriate, and perfectly matched the desired palette. I snapped a photo and sent it to Olivia. The reply arrived within a minute. It resembles the mourning attire of an elderly nun. Can you not find something chicer? I stared at the screen, my cheeks burning with humiliation. The saleswoman beside me cast a sympathetic glance. My face, it seemed, was an open book of mortification. Trouble selecting, ma'am? She asked gently. You could say that, I sighed. My future daughter-in-law believes I should appear 20 at her wedding. The saleswoman smiled knowingly. I might have just the thing. It's from the new collection, not yet on display. She produced an ivory-colored dress with subtle silver accents. It was elegant, with three-quarter sleeves and a moderate, contemporary collar, falling just below the knee in flowing chiffon. Nothing ostentatious. It's beautiful, I said sincerely. May I try it on? The dress fit flawlessly. I took a picture in the fitting room and sent it to Olivia with a terse message. How about this? It took a while for a response. Finally, my phone chirped, it will suffice. But the accessories must be silver. No pearls or antiquated brooches. I showed the message to the saleswoman. She rolled her eyes. Your daughter-in-law sounds like a real gem, she remarked sardonically. She's energetic, I replied diplomatically. We have some exquisite silver accessories, she gestured to a display. I can find something to complement your dress. In the end, I purchased both the dress and a set of silver jewelry, a delicate necklace and earrings with small amethysts. They harmonized beautifully with the ivory hue of the dress and possessed a modern simplicity that even Olivia couldn't fault. That evening, Dylan called, his voice strained. Mom, did you speak to Olivia today? Yes, about the dress, I replied. It's resolved. I bought something she approved of. Good, he exhaled with palpable relief. She's been in a frenzy all day about it. You know, the wedding is in 2 weeks, everyone's nerves are frayed. I understand, I said softly. Look, Mom, he paused. I know Olivia can be demanding. But she simply has a very clear vision. She wants everything to be perfect. Of course, I agreed. And also, he hesitated again, we were contemplating that perhaps you shouldn't attend the rehearsal dinner the night before. It will be quite chaotic, and with your knees, standing for prolonged periods would be arduous. Just come directly to the ceremony, all right? I felt my heart clench. Another exclusion. Whatever you say, Dylan. My voice remained steady, though a cold fury began to simmer within me. Thank you, Mom. You're truly the best. He was clearly relieved that the conversation had unfolded without confrontation. I'll arrange a car for you on the wedding day. After the call, I sat in my armchair for a long time, staring out the window. Darkness had deepened outside, and my reflection in the glass grew sharper, more defined, a gray-haired woman with weary eyes. When had I become someone my own son found embarrassing? A week before the wedding, Olivia organized her bachelorette party. I was not invited, of course. I discovered it accidentally when I called Dylan, and he muttered he was at a pub with friends because the girls had taken over the house for their celebration. I felt a profound loneliness that night. I dialed Leo's number. Grandma, he chirped. Just about to call you. How are you? I'm fine, I attempted a smile, though he couldn't see it. How's school? It's going well. Listen, I was wondering if you'd be at the wedding rehearsal? No, I replied. Dylan said it would be too hectic, and it'd be better if I just came directly to the ceremony. A pause. Oh. Leo's voice turned frigid. And you agreed? What was I to do? To tell him that you are the mother of the groom, and that you have every right to attend the rehearsal for the wedding which you are paying for. Leo's voice rose. Grandma, they are simply exploiting you. They want your money, but they don't want you. His words cut deep, though I knew the bitter truth they held. Leo, I don't wish to create any conflict before the wedding. Just let things proceed as they are. It's not right, he insisted stubbornly. I'll speak to my father. No. I almost shouted. Please, don't get involved. It will only make me feel worse if you cause a scene. He reluctantly agreed, but I could feel his simmering resentment even through the phone line. The night before the wedding, sleep eluded me entirely. My mind ceaselessly replayed the coming day. How would I be received? Where would I be seated? Would I be condemned to spend the entire evening amidst strangers? Would Dylan even acknowledge my presence, save for the formal photographs? I spent an extended period preparing that morning, carefully arranging my hair and applying subtle makeup. I donned the new ivory dress, accessorized with the silver jewelry. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, surprised to note that I looked good. Elegant. Dignified. Precisely at the appointed time, the chauffeured car arrived. I made one final check of the wedding gift, a substantial check enclosed in a silver-ribboned envelope, and left the brownstone. The drive to the Grandview estate seemed shorter than before, or perhaps I was simply lost in my own turbulent thoughts. As I stepped from the car, I saw that guests were already congregating on the terrace. The weather was idyllic, sunny but not overly warm, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. I made my way toward the entrance, my heart thrumming. This day could either herald a new, happier chapter with my son and his wife, or it could be the final, crushing confirmation that I was nothing more than a gray-haired ATM to them. I awoke with the sun's first tentative rays. Outside my window, the sky was a perfect, cloudless blue, as if nature itself had conspired to provide the ideal setting for my son's wedding. Despite Dylan's counsel against early arrival, I decided to head to the Grandview estate 2 hours before the ceremony's official start. It wasn't out of obstinacy, I simply yearned to help, to feel useful, to be a tangible part of this monumental day. I booked a taxi for 9 a.m., even though guests weren't expected until 11 o'clock. As the driver loaded my small handbag into the trunk, I glanced back at my brownstone. A strange sensation, as if I were leaving for an extended journey, despite planning to return that evening. A peculiar premonition pricked at my heart, but I dismissed it. A lovely day for a wedding, the driver remarked as we pulled away. Indeed, the weather is beautiful, I agreed, smoothing the folds of my ivory dress. Are you the mother of the bride? The groom, I corrected gently. Oh, you must be simply bursting with excitement. Sons are so special to their mothers. I merely nodded, not wishing to delve into the intricate complexities of our relationship. Instead, I stared out the window at the familiar New York landscape, pondering how Dylan's life would transform after today. Would he find true happiness? Would Olivia genuinely be the partner he needed? And would I, somehow, carve out a place for myself in their nascent family? The Grandview estate was already a hive of activity upon our arrival. Delivery vans lined the driveway, workers meticulously positioned additional lighting, and florists carried vast baskets of blooms. I paid the driver and headed toward the main entrance, feeling a touch awkward. Perhaps Dylan had been right, perhaps my early arrival was a misstep. In the grand lobby, I encountered Miss Potter, who appeared simultaneously composed and faintly flustered. Upon seeing me, her eyebrows arched in surprise. Mrs. Vance, you're exceptionally early. The ceremony isn't until 11:30. I know, I offered a small smile. I thought perhaps I could lend a hand. It is my son's wedding, after all. Miss Potter glanced at her wristwatch. That's very kind of you, but we have everything perfectly in hand. Guests will commence arriving in 2 hours. Perhaps you'd prefer to rest in the library? It's quite serene in there, and the garden view is delightful. I understood that I was being politely, but firmly, dismissed. Yet, I decided not to capitulate so easily. Where is Dylan? I'd like to offer my congratulations before the ceremony. Mr. Vance is currently preparing in the East Wing, but he specifically requested not to be disturbed before the event, Miss Potter stated softly but resolutely. Pre-wedding jitters, you understand. I nodded, though a painful knot tightened in my stomach. My own son, unwilling to see me before the most significant moment of his adult life. Was I truly such a burden? And Olivia? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Miss Malcolm and her bridal party are in the West Wing. They're concluding their hair and makeup. Strictly a ladies-only affair, Miss Potter offered a professional, tight-lipped smile. Why don't you enjoy a cup of tea in the library? I'll send someone to escort you when it's time to take your seat. Reluctantly, I allowed myself to be led into the library, an elegant room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and plush armchairs by the window. As the door clicked shut behind Miss Potter, I felt a familiar sensation of being trapped, isolated from the very celebration I was funding. 20 minutes later, a young waitress appeared with a tray bearing tea and cookies. I thanked her, then inquired about the preparations. Rather hectic, ma'am, she replied. The bride has already altered the main hall's flower arrangements twice, and there seems to be a slight issue with the cake. The frosting isn't quite the right shade. Really? I couldn't conceal my surprise. The pastry chef is one of the most acclaimed, yes, ma'am, but Miss Malcolm is very particular about her vision. The girl chose her words carefully. She desires absolute perfection. After the waitress departed, I walked to the window. It overlooked the terrace where the wedding arch was nearly complete. Pristine white chairs stood in neat rows, a path strewn with petals winding between them. Everything was immaculate, and utterly untouched by my hand. I decided I wouldn't sit idly in the library until the guests arrived. After all, I was paying for this wedding, and I had every right to witness the ongoing preparations. Stepping into the hallway, I headed toward the main ballroom where the dinner was to be held. The hall had been transformed since my last visit. Tables, draped in crisp white linen, were set with gleaming silver and crystal, adorned with arrangements of ivory and soft lavender flowers. At each place, a card bearing a guest's name. I located my assigned table in the furthest corner of the room, exactly as I had anticipated, directly adjacent to the kitchen exit. A wry grin touched my lips. How symbolic. Mrs. Vance, a man's voice called out. I turned to see a young man in a suit, one of Miss Potter's assistants. The guests are beginning to arrive. Miss Potter said you should take your seat for the ceremony now. I glanced at my watch. Time had passed more quickly than I realized. As I stepped onto the terrace, I saw that the first guests were indeed already seated. The master of ceremonies directed me to a seat in the front row, the day's sole concession. At least I would be close to Dylan during the exchange of vows. Gradually, every seat filled. I stole glances at the arriving guests, mostly younger than myself, many clearly affluent, judging by their attire and jewelry. I recognized Olivia's relatives by their striking resemblance, the same confident bearing, the same assessing glances. Finally, the music swelled, and Dylan, handsome in a perfectly tailored suit that surely cost a fortune, walked down the aisle. He looked tense, but undeniably distinguished. My heart swelled with a familiar maternal pride, despite everything. His best man, a colleague I'd met briefly at a few corporate events, stood beside him. Dylan scanned the assembled crowd, and for a fleeting second, our eyes met. I offered a small, tentative smile and a faint wave. He nodded curtly in return, then quickly averted his gaze, as if embarrassed. The music shifted, the guests rose, and Olivia began her slow, deliberate procession down the aisle. I had to admit, she was breathtaking. Her ivory gown, intricately embroidered with crystals, clung to her perfectly, the sweeping train trailing behind her like a shimmering river. Her face radiated triumph. She had achieved everything she desired. The ceremony was flawless, the exchange of vows, the rings, the first kiss as husband and wife, every moment precisely choreographed. I furtively wiped away a tear as Dylan recited his vows. Despite the challenges, I felt happy for him. Or rather, I desperately wanted to feel happy. After the ceremony, guests drifted to the garden for a cocktail reception. I remained slightly apart, observing Dylan and Olivia accept a seemingly endless stream of congratulations. A few individuals approached me, introduced themselves, made polite small talk, then moved away. I felt utterly alien, a phantom at this joyous occasion. Suddenly, someone called my name. I turned to see Leo hurrying toward me through the mingling crowd. My grandson looked remarkably mature in his crisp suit, his hair neatly combed back. Grandma. He enveloped me in a tight hug. Finally found you. How are you? I'm well, honey, I nestled into his embrace for a moment. You look very handsome today. And you look stunning. He pulled back, surveying me. That dress really suits you. Thank you, I smiled. Olivia chose it. Leo grinned. Of course she did. Listen, have you been introduced to her relatives yet? They're clustered in a separate group by the fountain, like royalty. No, I shook my head, but I didn't expect to be. The newlyweds have a great deal on their minds today. They're busy. Leo snorted. All Olivia does is pose for pictures and collect compliments. She could have spared a minute to introduce you to her family. Leo, I glanced at him warningly, let's not. It's their wedding day. We don't want to overshadow it. He nodded, but I could see his effort to restrain himself. All right, Grandma, but I'll stay with you. I don't want you sitting alone. Honey, you have your own friends, I gestured toward a group of young men, clearly Leo's peers. Go enjoy yourself. I'm fine. He reluctantly agreed, but before departing, he whispered, if you need anything at all, call me immediately. Left to myself, I decided to stroll through the garden. Every detail was curated with impeccable taste, fountains, artful floral displays, subtle lighting waiting to illuminate the evening. The sheer cost of such splendor made me shudder inwardly, but I reminded myself that I had done this for Dylan. The newlyweds' photo shoot seemed to stretch on endlessly. The photographer commanded them like a general on parade, forcing them into various poses against the picturesque backdrop of the estate. I watched from a distance, hesitant to approach. At one point, they began taking group photos with relatives. I was not invited. I saw Olivia embracing her parents, Dylan shaking hands with her father. My son was enveloped by a new family, a circle with no space for me. Finally, the resounding gong announced dinner. I found my table in the deepest corner of the hall. A few older guests were already seated there. I surmised they were Olivia's distant relatives, likewise relegated from the main table. We exchanged polite introductions, a few perfunctory sentences about the weather and the beauty of the ceremony. The dinner was exquisite, the wines costly, the service impeccable. But I barely registered the taste of the food. All my attention was fixed on the head table, where Dylan and Olivia sat, surrounded by her family, laughing and conversing like long-lost friends. Not once during the entire dinner did my son glance in my direction. After dessert, the toasts began. Olivia's father, a stout man with a booming voice, spoke first, extolling his daughter's virtues and his good fortune in acquiring such a son-in-law. Then, the best man delivered a speech filled with anecdotes about Dylan. Everyone received a mention, Olivia's parents, her daughter from her first marriage, even the dog that once resided with them. Not a single word about me. When the formal part concluded and guests began to mingle, I felt an urgent need for fresh air. I was lightheaded from the wine and the crushing bitterness of my insignificance. I walked out onto the terrace where the ceremony had taken place hours earlier. The chairs had been removed, but the floral arch still stood, bathed in soft, ambient light. I drew a deep breath of the cool evening air. Suddenly, I yearned to leave, to return home, to banish this day like a bad dream. But I couldn't. I had to endure the cake cutting, the newlyweds' first dance. I had to smile and maintain the illusion that all was well. There you are. Olivia's sharp voice pierced the quiet from behind me. I've been searching everywhere for you. I turned. She stood in the doorway, radiant and breathtaking in her wedding gown, but the expression on her face starkly contradicted the image of a blissful bride. Her eyebrows were furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Is something amiss, Olivia? I asked, attempting to maintain my composure. What's wrong? You've ruined my wedding, that's what's wrong. She advanced, swaying slightly on her high heels. The scent of champagne preceded her. I'm confused. What are you talking about? I've tried to be subtle all day, invisible, she interrupted with a bitter laugh. You arrived 2 hours early, scrutinizing every detail, sticking your nose into everything. And now you've chosen this moment to conspicuously absent yourself just as everyone's looking for us to cut the cake. Olivia, I was simply getting some air, my voice trembled. I didn't know about the cake. Don't pretend, she shrieked. You've deliberately attempted to spoil my day from the very beginning. First, arguing over trivialities, then showing up early this morning when you were expressly told not to, and now this dramatic disappearance. I stared at her, stunned. What had become of the sweet smile she'd bestowed upon her guests mere minutes ago? A completely different woman stood before me, enraged, aggressive, inebriated. Olivia, please, calm down. I tried to speak softly. I meant no harm. Shut up, she bellowed, so loudly that several guests on the terrace turned their heads. I know exactly what you're doing. You've always done this. Dylan told me how you controlled him his entire life, how you smothered him with your so-called care. I felt the blood drain from my face. My son said that? That's not true, I said quietly. I only ever desired what was best for him. The best? Olivia snorted contemptuously. You wanted him to remain dependent on you. But now he has me, and your pathetic manipulations will no longer work. By now, a small audience had gathered around us. I could see the shocked faces of the guests, hear their hushed whispers. The humiliation stung far more acutely than the anger. Olivia, please, I took a step toward her, extending my hand. Let's not make a scene. This is your day. Don't touch me, she recoiled as if I were a leper. And yes, it is my day. A day you are trying to ruin with your very presence. Dylan appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the commotion. What is going on here? He looked from me to Olivia. Your mother. Olivia shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. She deliberately came out here to disrupt the cake cutting so everyone would be looking for her instead of enjoying the party. Mom. Dylan turned to me, his eyes not filled with understanding, but with sheer annoyance. Why are you out here? Everyone is waiting. I was just getting some air, I repeated, tears stinging my throat. I didn't know they were looking for you for the cake. See? Olivia clutched Dylan's arm. She's in denial. Typical passive aggression. She always does that. You said so yourself. I looked at my son in desperate appeal, expecting him to refute her words, to deny he had ever uttered such a betrayal. But he remained silent. And that silence was more damning than any accusation. Dylan, my voice was barely a whisper, do you truly think that? He averted his eyes. Mom, let's not do this now. Just, go back inside. We'll forget this incident ever happened. Forget? Olivia's voice rose even further. She has been ruining our day since this morning. I don't want her to stay. I don't want to see her behind our cake, in our pictures. Dylan looked helplessly from me to Olivia, then back again. I could see him agonizingly searching for an escape from the situation. Olivia, perhaps you could calm down a little, he began. No, she stomped her foot like a petulant child. I will not calm down. I want her gone now. You're not welcome. Go away. She literally screamed the last words into my face. A sudden, profound silence descended. The guests froze, uncertain where to look. I gazed at my son, expecting him to defend me, to declare that his own mother could not be an unwelcome guest at his wedding. But he remained mute, his eyes cast down. Dylan? My voice trembled. He finally met my gaze, and I saw no love there, no gratitude, only profound weariness and frustration. Perhaps you really should go, Mom, he said quietly. You've seen the ceremony, and Olivia is quite upset. Something inside me finally snapped. The last fragile thread connecting me to my son broke with an almost audible sound. All right. I straightened, gathering the last shreds of my dignity. I will leave. Congratulations to both of you. I walked slowly toward the exit, feeling the burning stares of the shocked guests. No one stopped me. No one uttered a word. Only Leo, who had appeared in the doorway, tried to approach, but I shook my head. I didn't want him to fight with his father over me. In the coat room, I retrieved my handbag and shawl. The doorman hailed a taxi for me, carefully avoiding eye contact. Apparently, word of the scandal had spread instantly. As I waited for the car, Miss Potter approached me. Mrs. Vance, she looked genuinely distressed. I am so terribly sorry about this. Perhaps in the morning, when everyone has settled down, it's quite all right, Miss Potter, I interrupted. Some things cannot be mended with apologies. But the bills, she faltered. The final accounting, we will discuss that tomorrow, I smiled tiredly. Right now, I simply wish to go home. The taxi arrived 10 minutes later. As it pulled away, I took one last look at the illuminated windows of the Grandview estate. Inside, the festivities continued, the music, the laughter, without me. It was as if I had never truly existed in Dylan's life. The morning after the wedding, I awoke late. My body ached as if I'd run a marathon, despite having exerted no physical effort yesterday. It was the crushing weight of emotional exhaustion. In the first moments after waking, I clung to the hope that the previous day's events had been nothing more than a terrible dream, but reality, harsh and unyielding, swiftly returned. My son had allowed his new wife to publicly cast me out of the wedding I had paid for. I made myself tea, though my appetite was non-existent. My cell phone, which I had deliberately silenced last night, lay inert on the kitchen table. I hesitated before turning it on. I dreaded hearing apologies, and even more, accusations. Yet, I knew that sooner or later, I would have to face the repercussions of my decision not to settle the remaining bills. My phone vibrated, signaling a cascade of messages, 12 missed calls and 8 new messages. Most were from Dylan, a couple from Leo, and one from an unfamiliar number, likely Miss Potter. I chose to read the messages first. Mom, we need to talk. Call me when you see this, was Dylan's first, sent late last night. Why aren't you answering? This is urgent, the second, an hour later. Grandma, are you okay? Please answer, from Leo, sent around midnight. Dylan's subsequent messages grew increasingly insistent, tinged with irritation. Mom, there's a problem with the billing here. The administration says you're refusing to pay the balance. Is this some kind of misunderstanding? Call me back immediately. Do you grasp the situation you put us in? The final message had arrived mere minutes ago, on my way to your place. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I sighed. So, Dylan would arrive soon. I wondered which version of him would walk through my door, the apologetic son or the furious accuser. Though I already knew the answer. As I tidied myself, washing my face, brushing my hair, slipping into my house dress, a plan began to crystallize in my mind. No, I would not pay the remaining wedding bills. But it wasn't merely about the money. I would no longer allow myself to be used, manipulated by guilt or distorted maternal duty. Enough was finally enough. Precisely 25 minutes later, the doorbell rang, a sharp, demanding peal. I opened it to find Dylan. He looked utterly drained, wrinkled shirt, dark circles under his eyes, disheveled hair. But what struck me most was the expression on his face, not remorse, but raw anger. Finally, he blurted, striding uninvited into the brownstone. Why weren't you answering your phone? Do you have any idea what you've done? I closed the door and turned to him, my voice calm. Hello, Dylan. It's good to see you too. Mom, this is no time for sarcasm. He ran a hand nervously through his hair. We're in serious trouble. The Grandview Estate Administration says you've refused to pay the balance for the wedding. They're demanding the full amount by the end of the day or they'll sue. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Dylan stared at me in bewilderment. You have to pay. You promised. I promised to pay for my son's wedding where I would be a welcome guest, I stated calmly. But as your wife made abundantly clear, I was not welcome. And you, my dear, agreed to that. Dylan's face flushed, not with shame, but with mounting fury. Mom, you're an adult. Olivia was stressed, she drank too much champagne, she said things. It happens at weddings. You can't just go and commit financial sabotage? I chuckled, a dry, bitter sound. That's an interesting turn of phrase. What, then, Do you call allowing your wife to publicly humiliate your own mother? What do you call taking her side? I didn't take sides, he shouted. I was trying to de-escalate the situation. By sending me home, I finished for him. A remarkably effective method of de-escalation. Dylan collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Mom, please. I haven't slept all night. Olivia is hysterical. Her parents are furious. If these bills aren't paid, it will be a scandal across the entire city. Think of my reputation. Did you consider my feelings when you allowed Olivia to banish me? I asked quietly. He looked up at me, and a flicker of something, perhaps understanding, perhaps regret, passed through his eyes, only to vanish swiftly. Look, I understand you were uncomfortable. I apologize for Olivia, she was just overwhelmed. But you can't punish us like this. This is, it's blackmail. No, Dylan, I shook my head. It's not blackmail. It's consequences. Every action has consequences. You and Olivia made your choices yesterday. Now, you must live with them. But the bills, he choked on his indignation. You promised. We can't possibly pay that kind of money. We have the mortgage, the new car, you have a good job, I said. So does Olivia. You'll manage. Mom, you don't comprehend. He sprang to his feet. It's not just about the money. If we don't pay, it will be a public disgrace. Everyone will say we threw a wedding we couldn't afford, that we're swindlers. Isn't that right? I met his gaze directly. You orchestrated a wedding with money you couldn't afford. You exploited me as an ATM, then discarded me when I became inconvenient. That's not fair. Dylan slammed his fist against the wall. We didn't exploit you. You offered to help. Yes, I did. I agreed because I longed to be a part of your joyous day. But what I received instead was public humiliation. Dylan took a deep, shaky breath, visibly striving for calm. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more calculated. Mom, I understand you're upset, but let's be rational. Consider your own reputation as well. If you refuse to pay, people will say you're a bitter, vindictive old woman. I smiled involuntarily. He's resorted to manipulation. How utterly predictable. I do not care what people say, Dylan. At my age, reputation has become remarkably unimportant. What about Leo? He switched tactics again. You're placing him in an impossible position. He'll be caught between two fires. Leave Leo out of this, I said, my voice hardening. He has nothing to do with this. He's my son. Dylan exclaimed. And your grandson. You're destroying our family with your selfishness. There it was. The word I had been expecting, selfishness. All my life, I had given, my time, my money, my love. And every time I attempted to establish boundaries, I was branded selfish. I wonder, I said quietly, when I spent the last of my savings on your education, was that selfishness? When I helped with the down payment on your house, was that selfish? And when I agreed to pay for a wedding that even your fiancée, with all her regal demands, couldn't afford, was that selfishness too? Dylan looked away, but he didn't relent. You know precisely what I mean. If you truly love me, you won't put me in this impossible situation. You'll pay these bills and simply forget last night's incident. No, I said firmly. I won't pay. And I won't forget. He stared at me as if seeing me for the very first time. Are you serious? You're actually willing to ruin my life because of your petty resentment? I am not ruining your life, Dylan, I shook my head. If a few $1,000s can ruin your life, perhaps you should reevaluate your priorities. He snatched the jacket he'd thrown over the back of the chair. You know what? Olivia was right about you. You've always been like this, cold, calculating, controlling. You never truly loved me, you only loved the power that money gave you. His words inflicted a wound deeper than any physical blow, but I refused to show it. If it brings you comfort, Dylan, I said quietly, but we both know the truth. The truth? He laughed bitterly. The truth is you're jealous. Jealous that I found a woman who loves me, that I have a life of my own. You can't stand it, so you're trying to destroy it. Leave now, Dylan, I pointed toward the door. Before we both say something we will truly regret. Oh, I won't regret it. He headed for the exit. I'm finally speaking my mind, after years of holding back. You know, after Dad died, you became unbearable. Always intruding on my life, trying to control everything. The only reason I tolerated it was for the money. Yes, I admit it, it was your damn money. But you know what? It's not worth it. I'd rather live in debt than with a millstone around my neck like you. He slammed the door with such force that a framed photograph tumbled from the wall. The glass shattered. Symbolic. It was our family portrait, me, William, and little Dylan on a picnic. We were all smiling. I picked up the frame, carefully removing the photo from beneath the shards. Strangely, no tears came. There was an emptiness within, and a peculiar sense of relief. It was as if a long festering wound had finally burst, releasing all its poison. An hour later, Leo called. Grandma, are you all right? Dad just left your place, he's absolutely livid. I'm fine, honey, I answered, and it was true. But your father seems less so. He called me, yelling something about bills and your refusal to pay. Leo's voice was filled with concern. Is that true? Yes, I answered simply. I am not paying the remaining wedding bills. After the way they treated you, I completely understand. Leo's voice held a note of approval. But Dad's in a total panic. He says Grandview Estate is threatening to sue if they don't pay by tomorrow. Let them pay it themselves, I said. They have the means. They may have to postpone their honeymoon to the Maldives or sell one of their cars, but they'll manage. Grandma, Leo faltered, I'm entirely on your side. What they've done is unforgivable. But don't you think this could lead to a complete breakdown in your relationship? I sighed. Honey, the relationship broke down yesterday, when your father allowed his wife to throw me out of the wedding. Everything else is merely the consequences. You're probably right, he agreed sadly. It's just. I don't want to be caught in the middle. And you won't be, I said firmly. I would never put you in that position. You can continue to speak to your father as you always have. My relationship with him is one thing, yours is another. Thank you, he exhaled with relief. Listen, I want to come visit you this weekend. Just to be together, okay? Of course, honey. I'd truly love that. After speaking with Leo, I decided to leave my phone off for another day. I needed time to contemplate my next move. I had no doubt that Dylan and Olivia would persist in their attempts to coerce me into paying, whether through manipulation or threats. The following morning, the doorbell chimed. I hesitated to open it, suspecting it might be Olivia, prepared for another scene. But when I peered through the window, I saw a middle-aged woman in a business suit, a stranger. Mrs. Vance, she inquired when I opened the door, my name is Elizabeth Thorne, and I represent the administration of Grandview Estate. Come in, Miss Thorne, I invited her. I was expecting your visit. She looked slightly surprised by my calm demeanor but quickly regained her composure. Mrs. Vance, we have an issue regarding the payment for your son's wedding. According to our records, you agreed to cover all expenses, but yesterday you refused to make the final payment. I'd like to clarify a few things. I gestured toward a chair. Tea? Coffee? No, thank you. She sat, placing a file on her lap. Mrs. Vance, I understand there was an incident. Miss Potter has apprised me of it. However, from a legal standpoint, legally, I interrupted, I signed no contract with Grandview Estate. The arrangements were purely verbal, between my son and me. I agreed to pay for the wedding under certain conditions, which were not met. Therefore, I do not feel obligated to pay the remainder. Miss Thorne frowned. But you made a substantial down payment. It merely implies that I made a down payment, I replied calmly. Which, by the way, is non-refundable, as I'm sure you're aware. So, Grandview Estate has incurred no loss. The balance is considerable. She opened the folder and displayed the bill. Your son and his wife claim they cannot pay it. That is their predicament, I shrugged. They ordered the services, they received them, they should pay. Mrs. Vance, Miss Thorne shifted tactics. I appreciate that you're upset, but consider your family's reputation. If this bill remains unpaid, we will be compelled to pursue legal action. It will become a public matter. I am not concerned about that, I replied honestly. At my age, reputation is the least of my worries. She sighed, clearly taken aback by such an unexpected rebuff from an elderly woman. All right, Mrs. Vance. I will convey your position to the management. But I must caution you that if the bill is not settled by the end of the week, legal proceedings will commence. I understand, I nodded. Good luck. After Miss Thorne departed, a strange sense of peace settled over me. All my life, I had recoiled from conflict, striving ceaselessly to please, to be perceived as good. But now, with seemingly nothing left to lose, I could finally permit myself the luxury of honesty. And it was, unexpectedly, liberating. That evening, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Olivia, alone, without Dylan. She looked starkly different from the wedding day, no makeup, plain clothes, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from tears. Eleanor, she began, dispensing with a greeting, we need to talk. Come in. I stepped aside, allowing her entry. She walked into the living room and halted, nervously fidgeting with the strap of her bag. Look, I came to apologize for my behavior at the wedding. I was distraught. I drank too much champagne. I never should have said those things. But you did say them, I stated, not inviting her to sit. Yes, and I deeply regret it, she lowered her gaze. It was an absolutely terrible thing to do. I understand why you're upset. I observed her carefully. Her apology sounded forced, lacking any genuine contrition. This was not the same Olivia who had screamed at me on the terrace, nor the one who had meticulously, maniacally planned every wedding detail for months. This was an actress, performing the role of the contrite daughter-in-law. What do you want, Olivia? I asked bluntly. She blinked, thrown by my directness. I want to make amends. To start over. For Dylan's sake, of course. And for the bills that need to be settled, naturally, I added. Her face twitched, the mask of remorse momentarily slipping, revealing a flash of irritation. Yes, there is that, she admitted, quickly regaining her composure. But it's not just about money, Eleanor. I truly desire a good relationship with you. Why? I inquired. You made it abundantly clear that I am a nuisance to you, an unwelcome guest. Why would you suddenly desire a good relationship with me? She faltered, clearly unprepared for such an unvarnished question. You are Dylan's mother. An integral part of his life, which, by extension, means mine. How interesting that you didn't consider that when you ejected me from the wedding, I said, or when you meticulously arranged the seating chart, banishing me to a table with strangers, or when you insisted I acquire a completely new dress because mine didn't align with your precious color scheme. I concede I was overly demanding, Olivia adopted a pitiful expression. Weddings are incredibly stressful. I simply wanted everything to be perfect. And now you want me to pay for that perfection, I finished for her. She swallowed, clearly battling the urge to retort sharply. Yes, Eleanor. I hope you will settle the bills as promised. But that is not the only reason I am here. I genuinely want to mend our relationship. No, Olivia, I shook my head. You are not sincere. You are here because Dylan failed in his task of coercing me to pay. Now it is your turn. First the stick, now the carrot. How utterly predictable. Her face transformed again, the pleasant facade crumbling completely. All right, she said sharply. Let's cease this charade. Yes, I am here for the money. Because your son, my husband, is desperate. We cannot possibly pay this amount. If we don't settle with Grandview Estate, they will sue us, and it will utterly destroy Dylan's career. Is that what you desire? What I desired, Olivia, you were not interested in when you threw me out of the wedding, I replied calmly. Why should I care what you desire? Because it's not about me, she exclaimed. This is about Dylan. Your son. Are you truly willing to ruin his entire life because of your petty resentment? It ruined my life too, I said, but that didn't concern you. Olivia gritted her teeth. You are behaving like a spoiled child. An eye for an eye? Truly? At your age? At what age do you deem it appropriate to allow others to wipe their feet all over you? I asked. 70? 80? Or only when you are 6 feet under? You are just a vindictive old woman. Olivia shrieked. Dylan was absolutely right about you. You've always tried to control him through money. But you know what? We can do this without you. I'll sell my car. We'll take out another loan. But we will pay these damn bills. And then that's it. You will never see us again. Or Leo. Leo? I raised an eyebrow. He is an adult. You cannot prevent him from seeing me. We'll see about that. She snatched her bag and stalked toward the exit. He won't want to jeopardize his relationship with his father for the sake of an old woman who will soon be in her grave. With those words, she stormed out of the brownstone, slamming the door. I slowly sank into my armchair. The threats concerning Leo were painful, but I knew they were empty words. My grandson was an intelligent, independent young man. He would decide for himself with whom he wished to associate. The following day, I received a call from the Grandview Estate's legal counsel. He was more professional than Miss Thorne, but the essence of the conversation was identical. If the bill remained unpaid, a lawsuit would ensue. I politely explained my position and terminated the call. I then telephoned my own lawyer, Mr. Parker, who had managed my affairs since William's death. Mrs. Vance, it's good to hear from you. His voice was warm. How may I assist you? Mr. Parker, I wish to make some alterations to my will, I said, and perhaps seek your counsel regarding a potential lawsuit against me. We scheduled an appointment for the next day. As I hung up the phone, a strange tranquility enveloped me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was not acting out of fear or obligation, but out of profound self-respect. And let Olivia believe I was a vindictive old woman. I knew I was simply establishing healthy boundaries I should have erected years ago. The spring sun, a welcome guest, streamed through the windows of my new apartment, bathing it in light and warmth. I sat at a small table on the balcony, a cup of herbal tea in hand, admiring the serene view of the park. Precisely 6 months had elapsed since the day Olivia had cast me out of the wedding. 6 months that had utterly reshaped my life. After all the tumultuous events, I had made a decision that had long been brewing, a conviction I had lacked the courage to act upon, to sell the brownstone. The old Victorian mansion, steeped in countless memories, had become too vast, too burdensome for a single elderly woman. Moreover, it had tethered me to a past I was resolutely determined to release. The sale unfolded with surprising swiftness. A young family with 2 boisterous children instantly fell in love with the house, and I found genuine joy in hearing children's laughter fill its halls once more. The proceeds proved more than sufficient to acquire a cozy 1-bedroom apartment in a vibrant new neighborhood of Manhattan and to establish a robust financial reserve. My apartment, on the 3rd floor of a contemporary building, boasted an essential amenity, an elevator, a crucial consideration for someone with aging knees. Its windows offered a captivating vista of the city park, and within a mere 5-minute stroll, I could access all necessary shops, a pharmacy, and a charming cafe where I now relished Sunday breakfasts. I had not spoken to Dylan or Olivia since Olivia's theatrical visit and her empty threats concerning Leo. I had anticipated further attempts at coercion, but none materialized. As I later learned from Leo, they had been forced to secure a substantial loan to settle the Grandview Estate's bill, a devastating blow to their finances. The opulent honeymoon in the Maldives was cancelled. Olivia even sold her luxury car. Apparently, the entire ordeal had been sufficiently agonizing to deter them from continuing the conflict. Leo remained the sole, cherished thread connecting me to my former life. My grandson, defying Olivia's predictions, did not cease communication with me. On the contrary, our bond grew stronger, deeper. He visited regularly on weekends, assisted with the move, introduced me to his friends. Sometimes, we would simply converse for hours, about his studies, my new life, books, the ever-evolving world. "You know, Grandma," he remarked during one such visit, "I've never seen you so free." I looked at him, surprised. "Free?" "Yes," he nodded, helping me arrange books on the new shelves. "You used to seem a little tense. As if you were constantly bracing for something. But now, it's like you've finally spread your wings." His words resonated deeply. Indeed, despite my advanced years and all the recent turmoil, I felt lighter, more serene. It was as if I had shed a ponderous weight I had carried throughout my life. A new life demanded a new environment. I enrolled in a computer literacy course for seniors at the local library. Thanks to Leo's earlier lessons, I already possessed rudimentary skills, but I yearned to refine them. To my delight, I encountered many intriguing individuals my age, each with their own unique stories and experiences. I forged a particularly strong connection with Doris, a former literature professor, a widow like myself. She lived nearby, and soon we began regular walks, cinema outings, and visits to our favorite Sunday cafe. Her company was effortless, devoid of pretension or expectation, simply two women sharing the rich tapestry of their lives. "You know, Eleanor," Doris said one day as we sat in the park, watching children chase kites, "I always believed it was too late to embark on something new at our age. But you've completely changed my mind." I smiled, watching a little girl struggle with her kite string. "It's never too late to begin anew, Doris. The only real question is whether we possess the courage." After completing the computer course, I decided to take another step forward and volunteered at the same library. Twice a week, I assisted other seniors in mastering computer and internet skills. It instilled in me a profound sense of purpose and infused my days with meaning. Witnessing an 80-year-old woman send her first email to her grandson, or a 75-year-old man learn to Skype with his children abroad, these were moments of pure joy. I also resurrected my gardening blog. Although I no longer possessed a sprawling garden, I transformed my balcony into a veritable floral sanctuary and shared tips on cultivating plants in urban environments. To my astonishment, the blog garnered considerable popularity. The number of subscribers swelled from hundreds to thousands. "You're a bona fide internet sensation, Grandma." Leo laughed, helping me set up my social media accounts. "Soon you'll have more followers than I do." One afternoon, during another class at the library, I noticed a new attendee, an older gentleman with a neatly trimmed silver beard and kind, intelligent eyes. He sat in the last row, listening intently to my explanations about the fundamentals of email. After the class, he approached me. "Eleanor Vance?" he inquired, with a touch of uncertainty. "That's you, isn't it?" I scrutinized him, striving to recall where I might have seen him before. "Yes, that's me." "And you are?" "Robert Miller," he smiled. "We worked together at St. Jude's Hospital. I was a doctor in the cardiology department." "Dr. Miller." I remembered him instantly. "Of course. It's just, you've changed." "Older, you mean?" He chuckled. "Well, 25 years is a long time." We fell into easy conversation. It transpired that Robert had been widowed 4 years prior and had recently relocated to Manhattan to be nearer to his daughter and grandchildren. He, too, had resolved to embrace computer literacy to keep pace with the modern world. "I'd already mastered email," he said, "but social networking remains something of an enigma. Hence, your courses." After class, he suggested we have tea at the charming cafe directly across from the library. I agreed, and we spent a delightful hour reminiscing about old colleagues and hospital anecdotes. "You've changed, Eleanor," Robert remarked suddenly, studying me intently. "And it's not just your appearance. You've become more self-assured. You used to be so reserved, always in the background." "Life teaches you a great deal," I smiled, "especially when you're over 80. "I wouldn't say 80, Robert smiled playfully, "but perhaps 75. You know, I always thought you were a very attractive woman, but back then, we both had families, careers." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "At 82, who would have thought?" "Robert, you flatter me." "Not at all," he was serious. "I'm simply stating my observations. Perhaps we could have dinner sometime? I know an excellent Italian restaurant nearby." "Yes," I heard myself say, surprised by my own audacity. A date, at my age? It felt so unexpected and exhilarating. Dinner was scheduled for a week later. Robert was impeccably gallant, the conversation light and effortless. We discovered a surprising number of shared passions, a love for classical music, gardening, travel. By the end of the evening, I realized I hadn't felt so completely at ease in a man's company in a very, very long time. "May I escort you home?" Robert asked as we departed the restaurant. "I'd love that," I answered. We walked slowly, my knees, his heart, age asserting its gentle toll. But there was a quiet beauty in that unhurried pace. We spoke of the stars, of childhood memories, of dreams that had blossomed and those that had withered. At the door of my brownstone, Robert placed a light kiss on my cheek. "Thank you for a truly lovely evening, Eleanor. I hope we can do it again soon." "We will," I smiled, a strange, youthful excitement bubbling within me. Our meetings blossomed into a regular ritual. We attended movies, theater productions, concerts. Sometimes, we simply strolled through the park or sat on my balcony, discussing everything and nothing. Robert was attentive, intelligent, a delightful conversationalist with a wonderful sense of humor. He never rushed anything, respecting my pace, my boundaries. Leo was absolutely thrilled by our blossoming friendship. "Grandma, you're positively glowing," he exclaimed, noticing my new haircut and the stylish dress I'd chosen for our next outing. "Dr. Miller is a very fortunate man." I simply smiled in return. My relationship with Robert was special, not the fiery passion of youth, but the deep, warm affection of two individuals who had lived long, full lives and understood the true value of each passing day. One crisp spring morning, precisely 6 months after Dylan's wedding, Robert suggested we take a drive out of the city. He had rented a compact car with an automatic transmission, far more convenient for us. We departed early, while Manhattan was still stirring to life. The day promised warmth and abundant sunshine. Robert drove with calm assurance, despite his age. We left the bustling city behind, following a scenic route that wound its way toward the coast. "Where are we headed?" I asked, gazing out at the verdant landscape. "You'll see," Robert smiled enigmatically. "It's a surprise." An hour later, we arrived at a quaint fishing village, narrow, cobbled streets, white cottages with vibrant blue shutters, the invigorating tang of salt air. It felt like stepping into another world, far removed from the city's relentless pulse. Robert parked the car in a small piazza and gently assisted me out. "My sister resides here," he explained. "She has a charming little house overlooking the sea. She's currently touring Europe and offered me the use of her home whenever I desired." We ascended a steep lane to a whitewashed house perched on a hill. The view from the terrace was utterly breathtaking, the vast expanse of the ocean shimmering under the spring sun. "It's beautiful here," I breathed, unable to tear my gaze from the horizon where the sky embraced the water. "I thought you'd appreciate it," Robert said, standing beside me, his hand resting lightly on my arm. "When I was a boy, my parents and I would spend every summer here. This place always instilled in me a sense of boundless freedom and profound peace." We spent a glorious day walking along the shore, collecting seashells, and enjoying a leisurely lunch at a small, unassuming restaurant that served the freshest seafood imaginable. Robert recounted stories from his childhood, and I shared cherished memories of travels with William and little Dylan. As I recalled my son, I no longer felt the sharp pang of pain that had once been so constant, only a faint sadness for what might have been but was not. I had accepted reality for what it was, and that acceptance brought with it a profound inner peace. In the evening, sitting on the terrace with a glass of crisp white wine, we watched the sun slowly descend into the sea, painting the sky and water in magnificent hues of gold and purple. "Eleanor," Robert turned to me, his eyes serious, "I want to ask you something." My heart fluttered unexpectedly. "Yes?" "My sister has extended her offer for me to look after the house while she's in Europe, for at least 6 months. I was thinking, perhaps you would like to spend the summer here with me?" I stared at him, trying to fully grasp the implication. "You mean, move here?" "Not permanently," he hastened to clarify. "Just for the summer. The climate is wonderful, the sea air is invigorating, your knees would benefit. And I would truly cherish your company. To spend the summer by the sea, far from the city's clamor, with a man who had, in a few short months, become so very dear to me. 6 months ago, I would never have dared to contemplate such a bold step. But now, what about my apartment? And my volunteering?" I asked, ever practical. "Your apartment can be secured for the summer," Robert smiled reassuringly. "And your volunteering, you could easily offer online counseling. The internet here is excellent." I looked out at the tranquil sea, at the sunset-streaked sky, then back at Robert, his kind face, his attentive eyes, his distinguished gray beard. And suddenly, with absolute clarity, I realized that I wanted this. I craved new experiences, new impressions, new emotions. "Yes," I said simply. "I would love to spend the summer here." His smile was brighter than the setting sun. "You make me very happy, Eleanor." We watched the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the horizon, and I reflected on the astonishing unpredictability of life. At 82, I was embarking on an entirely new chapter, without fear, without regret, with an open heart. Returning to Manhattan that evening, I felt a profound sense of serenity. It was as if all the scattered pieces of my life's puzzle had finally, perfectly, fallen into place. I didn't know what the future held, but I was ready to embrace it, with all its joys and its inevitable challenges. At home, a message from Leo awaited me. He was planning to visit that weekend. I decided I would tell him about my summer plans. I was certain he would be delighted for me. Preparing for bed, I walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, a sprawling reflection of the starry sky. Somewhere out there, in one of those myriad houses, lived my son and his wife. Perhaps, someday, our paths would intertwine again. But for now, I was profoundly grateful to fate that I had found the strength to liberate myself from the cycle of toxic relationships, that I had discovered new friends, new interests, new feelings. Breaking free from those harmful bonds had opened the door to a peaceful and dignified old age. I was, at last, truly living for myself, unburdened by the expectations of others. And that, I knew, was the most precious gift I could ever bestow upon myself. "Thank you, William," I whispered, gazing up at the distant stars. "You always said I was stronger than I believed. I finally believe it." As I drifted into sleep, my thoughts turned to the sea, to the summer cottage, to Robert, and to the thrilling new chapter of my life that was just beginning. And that thought filled my heart with warmth and contentment.